What can shake an entire financial empire? A failed deal, a stock crash, or simply the gaze of a child? That night, in one of New York's most prestigious restaurants, where crystal glasses glittered and expensive suits carried the faint scent of luxury perfume, a reclusive billionaire pulled out an extra chair. Not for an investor, not for a politician, but for a little homeless girl, barefoot, clutching a napkin like a treasure. An act that seemed small, yet it blew up the entire city. The press howled, the board raged, shareholders reeled. Because in a world where money is prized above all else, a single moment of kindness is enough to defy ironclad order. And from that empty chair, a battle began. A battle not only between power and compassion, but between truth and darkness. The question for us is, which side would you stand on? With those who sneer, or with a child who only asked to sit and eat? Stay to the end, because this isn't just a story about a billionaire and a little girl. It's a story about how a moment can rewrite the fate of two people, and perhaps of us all. 3 words cracked like lightning through the glass ceiling of the Aurelius Room, a fine dining restaurant accustomed to gentle candlelight, the soft clink of crystal, and conversation small enough not to bother anyone. The entire room stalled. People lifted their eyes from foie gras, from a sommelier's perfectly tilted glass of wine, from the delicate ritual that turns dinner into a theater of privilege. Alexander Grant looked up. Across from him, at the edge of a silver-gray Persian rug, stood a girl of about 8, Lila Johnson. Barefoot, the hem of her thin dress frayed and dusty. Sun and wind-browned skin, tangled hair, eyes large and black, depthless. No theatrics, no tears. Just a simple question, calm to the point of cruelty. Can I eat with you? A heartbeat passed. Then the table to the right spoke first. We don't serve walk-ins here. Another voice, sharp as a knife. Someone call security. At the bar, people rolled their eyes, shook their heads. The Aurelius Room had never had a moment this unaesthetic. Alexander set down his fork. It had been a long time since he'd let food touch the plate without bringing it to his mouth, as if taste itself had suddenly become a luxury. What's your name? He asked, voice low and even, leaving no space for the scolding murmurs around them. Lila, the girl answered, clutching the edge of the tablecloth as if gripping solid ground. I'm hungry. A floor manager stepped forward, a thin, professional smile. Mr. Grant, we'll take care of this. No, she's my guest, Alexander cut in, gentle but firm. He pulled the chair opposite, set his hand on its back in invitation. Sit, Lila. The air fractured into invisible fissures. In that instant, the balance of the room, the artificial balance of elegance and civility, was knocked out of orbit by one simple decision, an empty chair filled by a hungry child. Lila sat, careful as if afraid of hurting the chair. The manager floundered between policy and influence. Before him stood Alexander Grant, founder of Grant Dynamics, a man whose schedule dictates tech conferences. And beside him a tiny crack, making the whole room wobble. In a dark corner, a young man in glasses raised his phone and clicked. The soft shutter fell like a speck of dust, but its weight would shake social media. 2 quick thumbs typed a caption, Tech Billionaire dining with a homeless girl at the Aurelius Room. Compassion or performative? Post. Alexander didn't look. He looked at Lila. What would you like to eat? Something Warm, she said, eyes still not daring to lift from the table. The server, young woman with a tight bun and startled eyes, laid a menu down lightly. Alexander shook his head. No need. Bring her hot soup, fresh bread, and the kitchen's recommended main. Go easy on any heat. The double doors swung open. 2 police officers appeared, reflective jackets still damp with rain. We received a report about a minor trespassing. The first officer stopped when his eyes landed on Alexander. The second lowered his voice. Mr. Grant, this is just procedure. Alexander took a small card from his wallet. Not the power kind people imagine. Just a direct contact and a record of quiet contributions to school meal programs. He put it away and met their eyes. She's having dinner with me. If there are procedures, we'll handle them after the meal. The officers exchanged a brief nod. We'll wait outside, just in case, one said. They withdrew like a draft through the curtains, leaving the city's chill behind without breaking the fragile warmth that had begun to form. The soup arrived. Lila lifted the spoon with both hands. Steam blurred her eyes to a shine. She blew on it and took a small sip, then paused, as if afraid that eating too fast would wake someone and get her thrown out. Alexander pretended to adjust his cutlery to give her a private moment with the bowl. A lady in a black dress whispered, "What is the world coming to? Where's my seat?" The man with her shrugged. "At least tonight we have a story to tell." Short, flat laughs. But at Alexander's table, deeper waters were starting to pool. "Where do you live, Lila?" he asked, as if speaking to himself slowly, careful not to crack the words. "Under a bridge. Near the canal. It's drier when it rains. I don't want to beg much. Only when I'm too hungry." The answer came as scraps, but they fell exactly where they should. Inside Alexander, something long, bandaged, scarred, oversplit with a quiet ache. He remembered a boy waiting for his mother outside a corner store in a working-class neighborhood, counting minutes to her second shift. Remembered scraped knees from a fall on concrete steps. Remembered his mother's refrain, "We're kind not because we can afford it. We're kind because we know what hunger is." "Sweetheart," the server whispered as she set down another basket of bread, "take your time. No one's taking your portion here." Her smile belonged not to restaurant protocol, but to a hearth. Alexander's phone buzzed. "Sophie Liang, head of communications. What are you doing?" "The image is going viral. Networks are calling. If you're there out of kindness, I respect it. But if we let media ride the wave, they'll shred this into 100 angles." Alexander looked at Lila, breaking bread into crumbs and arranging them beside the soup as if building a small roof. He answered, "No statement, no staged photos, just a meal." Then he hung up. "Tasty?" he asked. "Tasty, like having a warm blanket," Lila said, then glanced up, afraid her words were too extravagant for her. "Then have more." Alexander slid over the mashed potatoes, cut the salmon into small squares, and lined them neatly like floor tiles. A man-red tie, 2 heavy watches at his wrist, curled his lip. "Mr. Grant, charity has its place. This is not a shelter." Alexander looked up, calm. "No, this is a restaurant, and restaurants are for eating." He paused half a beat. "No one should have to ask permission to be full." Lila froze. Perhaps for the first time in months, she felt an adult stand entirely on her side. Not pitying, not pretending not to see, not shunting her to procedure. Dessert arrived, a lemon cheesecake, thin slice rimmed with honey. Lila gazed at it like a strange flower. "Can I have all of it?" "There's only one rule here," Alexander smiled. "Be full and be warm." She took a very small bite, then another. When she set the spoon down, Lila whispered, "I'll remember this taste so when I forget hunger." In the corner, another shutter clicked. A fresh status popped up, virtue signaling new peak. The undertow of judgment began to curl outside. But within the candle's small circle, another truth quietly took root. Dignity doesn't need noise to exist. Alexander asked for the bill, signed without looking at the number. He stood, holding his coat open. "Lila," he said, "it's cold out. You'll come with me. We'll find a safe place for tonight." "Can I bring this?" She held up the linen napkin, white, the restaurant's logo embroidered at the hem, folded neatly like a precious object. "It's like a reminder." Alexander hesitated half a second, then nodded. "Bring it. So you remember that from now on you don't need permission to eat." They stepped out of the Aurelius room. Before them, a ribbon of rain-silvered streetlights, behind restless lenses. The two officers slid aside in silence. A black sedan pulled up. Alexander opened the door, shielding Lila's head from the prickling rain. The door thumped shut. The noise stayed outside. Lila pressed her cheek into the warm leather seat, arms wrapped around the napkin like a doll. "Are you sure? I'm not getting you in trouble." Alexander met the eyes that were old and young at once. "Trouble is when people see hunger and look away. The rest just noise." The car glided through the city. Social media was ablaze, not over a billion-dollar deal, but over a chair offered to a child. On the median between lament and applause, Alexander chose silence, the kind with weight. He toggled the seat warmer, lowered the AC by one notch, and tucked a small bottle of water into Lila's hand. "Are you scared?" he asked at last. Lila shook her head barely. "I'm only scared of going back under the bridge." "Tonight," Alexander said, eyes on the rain tearing the city. "We're not going back there." Outside, panes kept trembling from arguments and explanations. Inside the car, two people from different worlds were heading in the same direction. At that intersection, a story began, not about a billionaire or a homeless child, but about the simplest thing society often makes hardest: letting a person sit and eat till they're full. The argument outside would be long, but in this small cabin the answer had already been written in warmth, soft bread, and 3 explosive words: "Can I eat with you?" met by an unhesitating nod. News traveled faster than the neon lights outside. Just an hour after Alexander Grant left the restaurant with little Lila, the first photo appeared on Twitter. Slightly blurred, hurriedly framed, yet carrying immeasurable weight. The famously cold tech billionaire sitting across from a barefoot girl, the two sharing a bowl of soup in New York's most opulent dining room. No caption was needed. The image alone was enough to tighten millions of hearts. But the internet is never one-sided. Comments split into fire and ice. One camp praised genuine kindness. No stage, no spotlight, just a humane act. The other wielded a sharp blade, a PR stunt. Billionaires don't accidentally bring a homeless kid into a place with a year-long wait list. Someone else wrote, if he were sincere, he'd have taken her to a shelter, not a five-star restaurant. Hashtags flared into a wildfire. Hashtag Lila at Aurelius. Hashtag Grant and the girl. Hashtag compassion or puri. Social media seethed as if it had just witnessed an earthquake. The epicenter, a small table at Aurelius. 24/7 news cut into programming, red banners racing across the screen. Alexander Grant breaks Aurelius room rules, altruism or media ploy. The anchor's smile bent half mocking. We all know Grant Dynamics is under scrutiny for defense tech contracts. Is Grant polishing his image? A panelist shot back, fervent, sorry, I didn't see a stage. I saw something else. In that moment, he wasn't thinking of stock or contracts. He was thinking of a hungry child split screen. Live bickering. Viewers at home picked sides, and the swell surged higher. Meanwhile, out on the street near the bridge where Lila used to sleep, homeless folks passed around a printout from a free paper. An old woman with silver hair stared at it and whispered, if a billionaire will sit and eat with a child like her, maybe tomorrow folks will look at us differently. The words traveled among the forgotten, a small flame warming a cold night. Across the city, in a Park Avenue elite group chat, the tone was icy. Alexander is making a fool of himself. Degrading another replied degrading, but at least he sat down. Would we dare? That opposition turned the story into a storm. In the high-rise offices of Grant Dynamics, PR director Sophie Liang was near panic. She gripped the phone, voice quick. Alexander, you just triggered an earthquake. The board is calling non-stop. Partners are rattled. Do you know the stock jolted within 30 minutes? On the other end, Alexander was steady. I know. I don't regret it, Sophie went quiet. She was used to a meticulously calculated, steel-cold Grant. Today he had chosen a path that existed on no roadmap. While the grown-ups argued, Lila clutched the white napkin, curled on the penthouse sofa, her eyes fixed on the glass wall, where the city flared like a sea of stars. Her voice was as small as breath. Mister, do they hate me? Alexander sat beside her, the light softening his usually stern face. No, they don't hate you. They just don't understand yet. And what people don't understand, they often fear. Lila bit her lip, murmured, but I only wanted to eat. He set a hand on the napkin in her lap. Yes, and that truth is strong enough to outlast all the noise. That night, before the city could fall asleep, a new clip surfaced. Not from the press, but a quiet diner. A short video of Alexander carefully cutting salmon into little pieces and sliding the plate toward Lila. Text over a slow piano track. He didn't have to. But he did over 1 million views in hours, then everywhere. In the comments, amid the storm, one line drew tens of thousands of hearts. I don't care if this was a stunt or not. At least tonight a child ate till she was full. A simple sentence that stripped the story bare. Because sometimes what matters isn't motive, but result. A chair pulled out, a hot bowl set down, a child who didn't have to beg that night. And here the audience must ask themselves, if you saw a hungry child step into a luxury restaurant, what would you do? Bow your head deeper into the menu, order more wine to drown the inconvenience? Or would you be brave enough to pull out a chair, despite the judging eyes? Maybe changing the world doesn't begin with board meetings or complex legislation. It starts with something very small, a seat for the uninvited. The automatic glass doors of the tower sealed behind them with a crisp click. Outside, flashes still popped, reporters shouting every kind of question. Inside, silence pooled, broken only by Alexander's footsteps on marble and Lila's soft breathing as she gripped his suit hem. The doorman glanced over, hesitated, but Alexander gave a short nod. No one dared ask. The elevator opened, warm yellow light bathing two contrasting figures, a man in a hand-finished suit, a little girl with dust-stained bare feet. The car shot up through dozens of floors. Lila pressed into the corner, eyes wide, fearful and curious. He bent and asked softly, "Never been this high in an elevator?" She shook her head, voice faint as mist. "No." "Under the bridge there are only concrete steps." The answer tightened his chest. Years of billion-dollar figures and glass-walled contracts, yet one simple sentence from a child made his own world feel impoverished. When the doors opened at the top, Lila stepped slowly into the wide penthouse. Lights flicked on automatically, glinting on polished wood. The glass wall opened onto New York, blazing in the night. She stood still, eyes round, whispering, "This is your home?" He nodded, "Yes." She blinked, looked around, and murmured, "The house is so big. I'm afraid I'll get lost." Alexander let out a small, rare laugh. "If you get lost, just call my name." "I'll find you." She nodded, but still hugged the restaurant napkin like a talisman. Her small hand trembled from cold and from strangeness. He led her to the kitchen, voice gentler than usual. "Do you want anything else to eat?" She shook her head. "No, I'm full, but is there a bed?" The question stunned him. An 8-year-old, and the first thing on entering such a home wasn't TV or toys, but a bed. "There is. A very soft one." He took her to the guest room. Snow-white sheets, pillows stacked high, a window facing the Brooklyn Bridge. Lila paused at the threshold, unwilling to step in. She whispered, "I can sleep on the sofa." He shook his head. "No, this is your room tonight, but it's too beautiful. If I sleep here, will they kick me out tomorrow?" Alexander sat to meet her eyes. "No one has the right to kick you out here. You're my guest." The brown eyes, dried by river wind, shimmered. She placed the napkin on the bedside table, smoothing it like a treasure. Before he turned off the light, she asked, "Do you usually eat alone?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." Usually she turned away, voice drowsy in the dark. "Me too. But today is different. I ate with you." He lingered a few seconds, watching the small figure curled under the blanket, then quietly closed the door. In the vast living room, he poured a glass of wine, but didn't drink. His hand tightened around the crystal, eyes on the night outside. He'd lived a life of brilliance and calculation, but for the first time, all plans had dissolved because of a simple question, "Can I eat with you?" And that very night, before the city slept, a small child made a penthouse long cold grow strangely warm. It was Lila's first night sleeping under a roof that wasn't a stone bridge or a leaking tin sheet, but the bright ceiling of a billionaire. And for Alexander, the first night he realized that sometimes a small decision to pull out a chair, to open a door, can change a life's trajectory. The next morning, sunlight poured through the penthouse's massive panes, laying a pale gold across the wood floor. Alexander had been up early, holding a coffee whose bitterness he couldn't taste. He heard small footsteps in the hall, turned and saw Lila, hair rumpled, still in the oversized pajama shirt he'd given her. She blinked at the light, gripping the neatly folded white napkin. "Can I have breakfast here?" A simple question that made his throat tighten. "This is your home now." "You can eat anywhere," he answered, keeping his voice level. But as he set toast on the table, the phone on the bar buzzed violently. Dozens of alerts, urgent emails from the board, messages from legal, a stack of missed calls from Sophie. The news hadn't slept, and the world beyond this apartment had begun its counterattack. On the financial channel, last night's chair pulling played on loop. The host intoned, "This could cost Grant Dynamics hundreds of millions in market value. Defense partners fear the brand is being diluted by sentiment." A guest was cold. A CEO may not let personal feelings overshadow duty to shareholders. Meanwhile, live-stream comments erupted in reverse. "If a hungry child can make him stop, maybe for the first time I believe the person behind the suit." Sophie called for the third time, breath quick. "Alexander, you must issue a statement now. Clarify this was a personal act, unrelated to the company. If not, the board will convene an emergency session." He sighed, eyeing Lila clumsily spreading jam with a small knife. "I'm not issuing any statement." "Not now," Sophie paused, then warned, "You're playing with fire." At the elite club where Alexander had been a regular, the story spread over morning tables. A man in a charcoal pinstripe sneered, "He wants to turn fine dining into a soup kitchen." Another said, "Maybe he's building a humanitarian billionaire brand for a future political run." Only one silver-haired lady set down her tea and shook her head. "Can't you see? For the first time, Alexander Grant looks like a human being rather than a money printer." That afternoon, when Alexander took Lila out to buy a few new outfits, flashes and microphones swarmed. A reporter shoved in, "Mr. Grant, are you using this child to burnish your image?" Lila startled, squeezing his hand. He bent and murmured, "It's okay. Look straight ahead." Then he faced the lens and answered evenly, "No child should have to beg to eat. If you want to call that PR, go ahead. For me, it's the truth." That evening, when the penthouse calmed again, he sat alone by the glass, looking out at the bright city. He knew there was no turning back now. A dinner that seemed simple had opened a crack in the upper world, where money had long papered over all feeling. And he, a control-hardened billionaire, was stepping into unmapped land. In the bedroom, Lila was curled under the covers, clutching the napkin like a charm. Alexander opened the door a sliver, watching her sleep, face patterned by darkness and light. He understood. The attacks outside could rattle a stock, but they could never shake the truth of a chair pulled out for a child. And that truth, fragile as it was, had begun to change him. The glass-walled boardroom on the 45th floor of Grant Dynamics blazed under halogen, but the air inside was colder than steel. The long line of black leather chairs was filled by 12 board members, faces set, each holding packets of figures and screaming headlines. At the head, Alexander entered tall, minimalist suit, but with the unmistakable shadow of a sleepless night in his eyes. Chair Diane Mercer tapped her pen, voice dry. "Alexander, thank you for coming. Let's be blunt. Your actions last night put the company in the eye of the storm immediately." Bradford, an attack dog director, lunged forward, 5% off the stock in 12 hours. Defense partners demanding explanations. Media turning it into a circus. You think you can gamble the entire company for a dinner with a street kid? Alexander was silent, his gaze skimming the charts behind them. Everything glared red, but his hands didn't shake. I didn't gamble the company, he said slowly. I staked something simpler, human decency. The room rustled, a few snorted. A bespectacled woman lifted her chin, voice cool. Decency doesn't pay a $10 billion defense contract, Alexander. Your duty is to protect shareholders, not play hero online. He leaned back, eyes deepening. And our duty is to build long-term value. If a company collapses because its CEO pulled out a chair for a hungry child, maybe its foundation wasn't worth keeping. Silence hardened. Diane tapped again, trying to restore order. Alexander, this isn't your first impulsive act. But this time the pressure is extreme. Some shareholders have suggested you temporarily step down to stabilize the situation. The air thickened to a knife's edge. Bradford smirked, savoring. Maybe consider it. You can keep playing foster saint to that girl while we run the company. Alexander met his eyes, ice cold. You're wrong. I'm not playing anything. I did what I believe is right. If that's inconvenient, perhaps you've forgotten what built this company. Not blind compliance, but a man willing to go against the current. He stood, pushing his chair back. The scrape sliced through the congealed air. If the board wants a nodding puppet, I'm not your man. If you still believe this company needs a leader who can see beyond spreadsheets, I'm here. Diane looked at him for a long beat, saying nothing. A few members dropped their eyes, tapping pens, unwilling to meet his gaze. Bradford ground his teeth, his rebuttal swallowed by the heavy quiet. Alexander turned and walked out. The glass door slid shut, leaving a board in pieces with its own fear. As the elevator descended, his phone vibrated. Sophie, her voice shook but held steel. You just made enemies of the board. But you also planted something in employees, an image they've never seen. A CEO blunt against pressure. On the intranet, staff are sharing your photo with the girl. They're calling it the Grant moment. Do you know what it could become? Alexander stared into the sunlit lobby, morning light slanting warm and blazing. He drew a long breath. I know. It's not just a moment. It's a beginning. That evening, the penthouse lights were bright, yet Alexander felt an unfamiliar chill. He'd spent the day wrestling the board, holding steady against daggered commentary. But what weighed on him wasn't stock or contracts. It was Lila's eyes. Since coming back from school, she'd been unusually quiet. No more innocent questions about the city. No more drawings. She sat curled on the sofa, clutching the first night's napkin, eyes fixed on the TV without truly watching. Alexander came over and sat. Lila, is something wrong? She hesitated, then pointed at the screen. A special broadcast blared, The Secret Behind the Brooklyn Bridge Girl. The reporter stood near the bridge where Lila had slept, a file in hand. Her voice was clear and cold. Sources say the girl lived here after last year's historic flood. Mother drowned in the surge, father vanished. But the question remains, was she abandoned? Lila trembled, hugging the napkin as if to disappear. They're talking about me. Her voice broke. Alexander grabbed the remote and shut it off. Enough. You don't have to hear that. But she shook her head, tears running. I remember that night. The water rose so fast. I saw Mama struggling and Dad. Dad let go of my hand. They're right. He left me. The words pierced him. He drew her in, letting her head fall on his shoulder. No, Lila. Don't let their words define you. You're not abandoned. You survived outside, the frenzy raged. Lila's image looped everywhere, not an anonymous child, but a target to exploit. Someone wrote, Alexander Grant is leveraging tragedy to varnish himself. A tabloid printed a long lens shot of Lila leaving a grocery store with him, captioned, From Brooklyn Bridge to $1 million penthouse, does she really belong there? Alexander knew this was no longer private. He called Sophie, voice firm, we need to protect the girl. Not just media legal, too, Sophie sighed. You know the rule. The more we protect, the more they smell prey. He was adamant. Then they'll smell only one thing, that she has a family. That night he tucked Lila in, drawing the blanket carefully. She looked up, pupils still wet. If they find my dad, will he take me back? Alexander paused, then squeezed her small hand. If that day comes, I'll be right here, fighting to the end, so you stay where you feel safe. Do you understand? She nodded, whispering, I just want to stay here. In this house, then drifted into a fitful sleep. He sat by her bed for a long time, watching her breathe, heart heavy. He knew the real battle had just begun. The board saw her as risk. The media turned her into entertainment. But in her, he saw what the world refused to. The pride of a child who would not bow. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Grant knew that all his power and wealth had to be spent on a single aim, to keep that smile intact, to defend the roof freshly raised. New York burned bright beyond the window, but in the little room only a warm lamp glowed on Lila's peaceful face. Alexander shut his eyes and whispered like a vow, I won't let the past swallow you again. That morning, New York behaved as if it had never known peace. Digital front pages erupted with a shared headline, The Mystery Behind Alexander Grant's Dinner. The photo of him and Lila at the restaurant sprawled across a Times Square LED. Passers-by stopped, stared, debated. Some voiced admiration, others snickered, calling it cheap theater. Up top at Grant Dynamics HQ, the air was thick enough to carve. On Alexander's desk lay files and clippings Sophie had left, each page a blade driven into his credibility. Anonymous posts spread, claiming he paid a child actor to play homeless. A finance blog provided evidence that disbursements from his charitable foundation had gone to a shady fund linked to the bridge area. Lies, but written so craftily many couldn't help but doubt. Sophie entered, eyes red from a sleepless night. Alexander, her voice hoarse, it's spinning out of control. A shadow media outfit called Black Quill is prepping a so-called Brooklyn Bridge dossier. They say witnesses saw you paying kids to stage the scene. Alexander's fist clenched. Who's behind it? She shook her head. Hard to trace. But leaked data suggests several hostile investors, especially the faction after your chair. He leaned back, brooding. He knew kindness wasn't what drew knives. Every blade hid beneath the cloak of interest. And now Lila, a child who'd just found a makeshift roof, was a tool to choke him. At the penthouse, Lila was still drawing with a worn box of crayons. She sketched a red roof house and two figures holding hands. It's you and me, she beamed. So later everyone knows you didn't leave me. Her smile warmed and pierced him at once. Outside, people were trying to turn her into proof of the opposite. A PR prop, a fabrication. That afternoon, leaving the office, he noticed a strange black car tailing him. At a red light, he checked the mirror. The man inside ducked his gaze. Old instincts from brutal deal worlds flared. This wasn't just press surveillance. He didn't call the police. He dialed an obscure name. Michael Torres, ex-security operative turned shadow advisor to the powerful. I need you to find out who's hunting me, and possibly the girl, Alexander said, voice gravelly. Michael answered short, I'm on it. Keep the kid safe, Alex. Keep her close. That night, in the penthouse hush, Alexander stood outside Lila's door. She slept curled, still clutching the white napkin. He eased the door shut, unease unresolved. From the moment he'd pulled out that chair, he'd placed himself in a war where enemies would not only try to break his name but crush an innocent child to win. Outside, city lights blinked like 1,000 watching eyes, tracking every step. In the dark, Alexander whispered into the night like a vow. There's no retreat now. If they want a fight, they'll go through me first. And I swear, they will never touch her. For the first time in years, the chill of power scared him less than the fragility of a small hand. And that turned him from a man of control into a true fighter, a reluctant father ready to go to the mat. New York never slept, but the air in Alexander's penthouse felt heavier than usual. After Lila drifted off, he stepped onto the balcony. Cold wind threaded his vest. Sirens wailed up from the avenue. The phone buzzed. Michael Torres. Alex, Michael's voice was low and certain. I've traced it. This black quill isn't an independent outlet. It's a shell for a dirty PR firm paid to destroy reputations. And guess who's bankrolling it? Alexander frowned. Bradford. Right, Michael said. He's working with a few foreign investors who want your chair. Worse, they paid someone who knew Lila's family in Brooklyn. They'll mine her past to the bone. Alexander gripped the railing. He'd stared down billion-dollar stakes, but this wasn't just stock or power. It was a child's fate. What do you want to do? Michael asked. Alexander exhaled. We can't go public. I won't feed Lila to the media. We need proof rip-off Black Quill's mask from inside. Michael chuckled softly. Then let me arrange it. Some people owe me. They know how to follow trails no one dares look at. The next day, Alexander went to the office as usual. Cameras jammed the lobby, shutters fired. He walked through in silence, his calm face giving no hint of the counter-strike underway. In a small suburban cafe, Michael met him with two old associates, a cybersecurity specialist and a former investigative reporter. On the table, a laptop bristled with data, leaked emails, signed off books contracts, even photos of Bradford exiting Black Quill's offices. Alexander watched, eyes brightening by degrees. Do we have enough? Michael shook his head. Enough to suspect, not enough to sink. But I've got a plan. We let them trap themselves. The plan began that night. A false tip appeared on the dark web. Alexander was about to announce a hundreds of millions homeless support fund, with Lila as its face. Black Quill pounced, readying exposés on the staged philanthropy. They didn't know Michael's team was tracking every move. While the enemy dug, Alexander chose silence, staying present with Lila. He took her to a community library. When she awkwardly picked up a fairy tale book, he said softly, "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Just remember, you had value from the moment you existed." She looked up, brown eyes damp but lit with a trust he'd never seen in himself. At night, as the city lit up, Michael pushed the final data to a secure server. Everything was set. Alexander knew the unmasking would come quickly, but he also knew this battle was not just to keep a chair. It was to show Lila that truth, even smeared with mud, shines brighter than any light outside. He stood by the window, city blazing, and whispered a promise. "To protect you, I'll face the whole world." Judgment Day came faster than Alexander expected. Monday morning, Grant Dynamics hosted its product launch at the Manhattan Convention Center. Hundreds of journalists, investors, defense partners. On paper, a routine tech event. For Alexander, a perfect stage for a counterblow. Tension snapped in the lobby. Reporters jostled, shouting, "Mr. Grant, are you exploiting the girl for image? Did you stage the Aurelius dinner?" Cameras hunted for a flinch. Alexander kept his face composed and walked straight into the hall. Backstage, Michael and the cyber team were ready. On the laptop, the covert contract between Bradford and Black Quill, leaked directive emails for the smear campaign, even an audio clip of Bradford gloating, "Once we seed the rumor, shareholders will turn." Grant won't last, everything prepared, waiting for light. The event opened with glossy product reels. But instead of diving into tech, Alexander stepped into the spotlight, mic in hand, lights full on his face. The room fell still. "I know," he began, "many here didn't come to hear about technology. You came to see how I'll explain myself. You want to see if I'll flinch before fake news, before filthy accusations." Murmurs rippled, cameras zoomed. He paused, then signaled the tech crew. On the giant screen behind him, not product specs, but leaked emails appeared line by line. Black Quill campaign objective: topple Alexander Grant by turning a child into a PR prop. Then a recording boomed, Bradford's unmistakable voice. The hall convulsed. Some journalists leapt to their feet. Bradford, front row, blanched and tried to bolt, cameras glued to him. Alexander continued, voice steady and resonant. "This is the truth. Not just an effort to bring me down, but a scheme to exploit and smear an 8-year-old child who only asked to sit and eat. You want to know if I regret anything? I regret letting people like this run wild in the dark for so long." Scattered claps spread, building to a wave. Online, the live stream exploded. Number sign "Stand with Lila" shot to the top. Comments poured. He said what needed saying. Enough. Let a child be. Bradford scrambled, calling attorneys, but the evidence was too blunt. The board suspended him that very day. Black Quill came under investigation, the entire dirty campaign exposed. Alexander looked straight into the broadcast lens and gave a small nod, a message in itself. Truth doesn't need PR. Truth carries its own power. At home, Lila sat before the TV, eyes wide, lips moving as she watched him on stage. When the audience rose to applaud, she patted the little table in front of her and smiled for the first time in days. That night, the world understood. The fight wasn't to guard a CEO's chair. It was to guard a child's dignity. From that day, Alexander was no longer just a tech billionaire. He became a symbol of a rare thing among elites, the courage to put people before advantage. After the seismic launch, New York couldn't stop saying two names, Alexander Grant and Lila. But this time, public opinion wasn't split. Across social media, Lila's radiant smile beside her red roof drawing spread as a new emblem hope. In the days that followed, Grant Dynamics stock recovered not from defense deals or blitz marketing, but from human trust. Employees who'd braced for impact now shared their own stories on the intranet. For the first time, I'm proud to see my CEO stand up for a child. A senior engineer wrote, I was going to quit, but I want to stay. We don't just build tech. We defend what's right. In the penthouse, Lila finally slept through the night without jolting awake. In the morning, she scampered around the house, showing Alexander a new drawing. Not just two under the red roof, but Sophie, Michael, and several others. This is family, she declared. The word pierced and soothed him with a long-forgotten feeling belonging. A week later, at a small press conference, Alexander appeared with Lila. He didn't talk about tech or stock. He announced a new fund, the Red Roof Fund. It would support children who'd lost their homes, helping them with not just beds, but chances to learn and grow. Because, he said, a bed and a meal are sometimes more important than a billion-dollar contract. The room went still, then erupted in applause. Reporters no longer asked about PR. They asked how to help. For the first time, the microphones pointed at him weren't daggers. They were outstretched hands. That night, he and Lila stood on the balcony, watching the city blaze. Mr. Lila said, today a lot of people wanted to help like you. He smiled, ruffling her hair. No, Lila. They're not like me. They're like you. You started this across town. Bradford sat in a dark apartment, watching news of the Red Roof Fund's rise. He knew the war was done. He had lost, not because he'd been stripped of power, but because the naked truth was out. Schemers can't beat a single act of kindness. Alexander and Lila's story closed a chaotic chapter and opened a new beginning. No one knew what the future would hold, but one thing was certain. The child who had slept under the Brooklyn Bridge had found a home, and a billionaire who had lived in a glass tower had found his heart. Because there are moments when you don't need the whole world to believe in you. You only need a child's eyes to look at you and say, I believe you. And that is strong enough to change everything. And so, from an empty chair in a luxury restaurant, an unknown little girl stepped into a billionaire's life. Not through money, not through strategy, but through simple truth and courage. The world gaped as the richest man in the room learned the greatest lesson from a child, that compassion is stronger than power and wealth. Today, they are no longer strangers, they are family, a refuge. And true legacy isn't in bank accounts, it's in the moment we listen, trust, and pass that trust on. One last question for you. In a calculating world, if an empty chair appears before you, what will you do? If this story touched your heart, share it so others can find hope. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more stories where kindness always has the last word.